So when Ben went back to England on a trip, and he went through the streets of London, and he saw beggars and prisons, debtors' prisons abounding, and people tied to straw mattresses, chained there until they could pay their debt. He thought, he went to Parliament, and they asked him why the colonies were so successful, and he said, well, it's simple. We just create our own money. And it comes out in proportion to the need of the people, and they build their homes, and we work, and we have our farms, and everything's fine, and everyone's happy. And well, when the bankers heard this, they got together and they said, we can't let this happen. If this happens in America, America will be the richest country on the globe, and we won't be able to get in on it. So they schemed and plotted right through up until 1913 when they finally got in their illegal system. And it was even put into the country illegally and unethically. They waited till Christmas time. All the Congress was away for the Christmas holidays, and a very small group put that bill through for the Federal Reserve. And of course, it was the same people who were sucking the blood out of Europe, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds. It was the same people and their stooges who put this in 1913. So this is the fractional reserve. And unfortunately, it's so ridiculous that it's unbelievable that people, well, they did understand in the 30s and the 40s. They knew how crooked it was. But today, there's nothing about it in the schools. There's no monetary history, which is why I teach it. But if you tell people you teach monetary history, the average person, their eyes glaze over, and it sounds as dry as the driest martini, but it isn't. Monetary history is about assassinations of presidents, of people in the peerage, of anybody who tries to change that crooked and illegal system so that people aren't debt slaves the rest of their lives. And a few presidents did. Jackson did. Lincoln did. I think Van Buren. And of course, Lincoln was killed for it. Kennedy did it. Over $4 billion he put out. They killed him shortly after and pulled all his United States dollars back in.
That's a very important issue with Kennedy. Explain what happened and how many dollars he printed up.
Well, if we're going to take it through in the historical, let's just do it chronologically so that we understand. There were fights between the banks and the government, the Congress in the U.S. from the beginning. And Alexander Hamilton was, of course, a Rothschild agent. He persuaded Washington that the first bank of the United States should be owned by him and a few pals. Hamilton and a few pals owned the first bank of the United States, and then their charter was refused, and then they threatened, Rothschild threatened, this is common knowledge, Rothschild threatened and said, if you don't take my bank back, you will find yourselves in a war and a depression. So we're looking at the War of 1812 that Rothschild promised he'd bring on if they wouldn't let him take over the money supply of the United States. So it's all quite out in the open. It's not a secret. All you have to do is look in history books, even not on the net. You can go into some history books who are still around who will tell you all the facts instead of just a few of them. So eventually, after a few years, and before 1913, of course, Jackson was the first president of the U.S. who said, called the bankers, you nest of vipers, I will get rid of you. And Jackson did. He was the only president. He survived an attempted assassination whereby two guns were pointed at him, right at him, and both guns misfired. So he lived through that. He was elected for 2 terms, and he promised. He said, I will give you your money back. I will get rid of these scoundrels. And he did, and that was the first and only time that the United States had a surplus. And when Jackson got the surplus, he divided it up sent it to the various states and said, here, use this for what your infrastructure needs are. And when he left the White House, white and black wept openly, and after that, when they had more problems, they were even suggesting, is there a way of getting Jackson back for a third term? And I suggest anyone who's interested in this one man who absolutely got rid of them, please read, I think it's by Schlesinger, The Age of Jackson. It's a wonderful book, and it goes right into the opposition he had. And they called him Old Hickory because hickory is the hardest wood in the world. You can't break it, you can't bend it. It practically takes dynamite, and that's what he was like. He was determined that the people would use their own money without having to rent it. And so he would veto things that the bankers would try and push things through, and he'd just say, no, we're not doing that. And and that was Jackson. And of course, Lincoln did the same thing and promised if he was reelected, he would keep putting out greenbacks. Well, he was shortly after he was shot in the head. And money was the people involved in that were the bankers again. And there was even money put in a Montreal bank here in Canada to pay the people involved in killing Lincoln. And then thirdly, in our own time, Kennedy tried that again, and he told the Federal Reserve he was going to take away some of their power. He told that to the FBI. Many, many groups wanted to kill him. But one of the groups that no one ever talks about, of course, were the Federal Reserve, because he issued, and I have got the exact figures here of what he issued. Now, I'm going to read this to you because this is from W.E. Scott, the Assistant Deputy Treasurer, and it comes from the Department of the Treasury, the Fiscal Service. And he's saying here, he's writing to a Senator Allott, and I've gotten papers from various groups in the U.S., and he says here, the United States notes are issued only in order to maintain a constant amount of, and I'm giving you the figure here, $322,539 dollars and $539,016. I don't know where they get this amount. In circulation as required by the Act of May 31, 1878. And this guy says here, this is an inadequate and inelastic supply of currency which cannot meet the changing requirements of a modern economy. Then why didn't they enlarge it? Number one, you can change the number any time you want, but they chose not to. And this is why. Then in his next paragraph he says, the Federal Reserve Act, passed in 1913, provided a flexible supply of currency, doesn't say that people have to rent it, which can be expanded or contracted in accordance with the needs of the economic policy. I'm sorry. Translated, this really means which can be expanded or contracted in accordance with the greed of the bankers, because that is what they did to cause the 1929 Depression. Since they were creating the money and charging interest on it by loans, through loans, they can pull in the loans whenever they want. And this is what they did. They pulled in about 1/3 of the loans. They wouldn't renew them. They wouldn't take new loans. And they lowered the actual money supply to about 1/3 in a very short time, which meant that nothing could be done, nothing could get done because the currency, the medium of exchange, was lacking by over 1/3. And so that way they caused the 1929 Depression. And Milton Friedman even says that, and everyone knows Milton Friedman is not exactly a democratic type, but he admitted that they caused the Depression. And so this is what the banker can do. When you have private control of your money system, depressions and recessions and wars can be brought about just through contracting the money supply, letting it out. So that this is what happened with the big housing, all the foreclosures in the U.S. now, and they're up about 81%. Loans, they make loans easy to get. You get your loan, you buy your house, you have so much down. A couple of years go by, it's all contracted again. You can't pay, so you have to walk away on your house, or you lose it, whatever. This is what is done all the time.